welcome back to my channel. My name is Lonnie. I'm currently a high school ELA and Appalachian history teacher at a small rural private school. I'm here to share with you some things that I have read in February and some things that I want to read in 2025. I only read 3 books in February, which is not on goal per se. I'm shooting for 100 books in 2025. To be clear, that's a stretch goal and I'm not sure that I'll reach it, but I did read 6 books in January. The difference being in January, we were still on school break, like winter holiday break. So I had a little bit more time. February was a busy month. It was my birthday. I turned 31. So let me tell you a little bit about the books that I read in February, and then I'll tell you about the books that I want to read in 2025. I think March is a perfect month for talking about goal setting, starting new projects, starting to bloom with the season of spring. I like to follow the seasons, the wheel of the year, if you will. If you're wondering what I'm consulting, this is my reading journal. It's just a notebook that I got at Target a few years ago. I think I started it in 2023, and I just journal every book that I read. Now, in 2023, I was still deeply, darkly in a bad time of my life. And this reading journal gave me something to look forward to. It gave me something to decorate, something to enjoy, like a new hobby. So even though there are not a lot of books logged in 2023, and not as many as I would like in 2024, this reading journal has been with me during some really tough times and helped me get through really difficult moments in my life. Now, on to the books for February. I shouldn't be laughing. I shouldn't be laughing about Onyx Storm. Here's the thing. It is so important to read fiction. It is so important to read potato chip fiction. This is a romantasy book. This is the 3rd book in the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros. This book is huge. The series is huge. There's dragons, there's romance, there's love, there's sex, there's everything that you could want in a romantasy book. There's magic, fighting, evil, bad guys. I love this series. I love Rebecca Yarros, and I don't think that just because something is romantasy or something isn't quote unquote high fantasy, that it's less intellectual or that it's less meaningful. Fiction is so important to read. It's so good for your brain. If you're like me and you read a lot of nonfiction, I would also encourage you to read a lot of really exciting, stimulating, fun fiction as well. It's sort of like a palate cleanser. It can get you out of a reading slump, but also it's just good for your brain. You can learn a lot about good storytelling. Look at this, by the way. I love, this is like the special edition. Actually, I had ordered this book on hold at Barnes & Noble. Then I went into McKay's and I was joking with my partner. I was like, wouldn't it be crazy if they had it? But nah, they wouldn't have it because it just came out. This book dropped January 20th, and I looked at Walmart for a couple weeks and I couldn't find it. So the next time we went to town, we went to Nashville, I had ordered myself a copy, but as luck would have it, McKay's had a copy of it. And I was so excited and I bought it and I canceled my big box store copy. Anyway, all that to say, I loved this book. I thought it was really great. It's a continuation of the series. There's no reason why you shouldn't read it. I just wanted to get on my romantasy fiction soapbox for a moment because I think it's so important to read fun fantasy sci-fi stories. I think it's good for your brain, is what I think. The next book that I read, I no longer have a physical copy of it because it was a borrow from a friend. This was Kids Beyond Limits by Anat Baniel. It's nonfiction, and I would call it like a childhood development book. My friend invited me to read this book and she let me borrow her copy of it. It's about helping children with disabilities and special needs. And for me, it was really enlightening. I am a teacher and I do have students with special needs. Now, the Anat Baniel method is, from what I understand, largely designed more for younger children. I teach high school. There's a little bit of a difference there. The concept of differentiation was really helpful. If a student can't perceive the difference in between what is successful and what is not successful, it can be really hard for them to model the behavior or learn the skill that you're trying to teach. And so really getting inside the brain and brain development of a child with special needs was really helpful. This book had good reviews. I don't know anything about the scientist who wrote it. I did do some Googling and I didn't see anything that was concerning. I just always like to take everything with a grain of salt and look to see, if an author or a scientist has maybe put out some research that's questionable. I didn't see anything for the author of this book. I was really happy to read it. I thought it was a really great book. The 9 Essentials, I'm starting to use in my own classroom. Attention with movement, going slow, using variation, subtlety, enthusiasm, flexible goals, the learning switch, turning that on, focusing on imagination and dreams, and awareness. Those are all things that I'm always trying to increase or work on across the board for my students in my class. I thought it was a really great book. The third book that I read in February, I also don't have a physical copy of. I listened to this one on Audible. It was Teaching Critical Thinking by Bell Hooks. I love Bell Hooks. I think she's an excellent writer, and this book was not exactly what I needed or was looking for. Let me explain. This is a collection of essays about education and teaching by Bell Hooks, largely taken from her experience as a college professor. They're really great essays. You know, if you're looking for theory about how to introduce feminism, or racial equality, or lessening the hierarchical power structures in classrooms, or how to deal with the spectrum of privilege that students in any given classroom might have, this is an excellent book. I was looking for more like a guidebook about how to help my students learn critical thinking, maybe with like activities or like lesson samples. Standardized testing these days is a lot about critical thinking. You know, can you perceive and discern what the question is actually asking you? The science section of the ACT, for example, you don't actually have to have encountered, you know, mouse fur pigmentation. You don't have to have studied that, but that might be on the ACT because you're reading a graph or a chart about it. And so the ACT is really asking you, like, can you read this graph? Can you look at this chart and discern what information the question is actually asking you? That to me rings more like critical thinking than anything else. So I really wanted a book about teaching my students critical thinking. This is something we talk about in class a lot. So this book was not exactly what I was looking for, but it was still a really great collection of essays that would help any teacher, particularly a beginning teacher that may not have been exposed to or taken like gender theory or studied racial inequality in college. That was like missing from your own curriculum. This is a really helpful book. Let's talk about books I want to read in 2025. Boy, do I have a lot of examples. These are not all the books that are on my TBR for 2025, and some of these may be swapped out for other books I find along the way that are more relevant. But one thing I wanted to do this year was to be more intentional about what I'm reading. Last year, I just kind of let like whatever came into my sphere that I found interesting or stimulating, I would pick it up because I hadn't been reading as much as I used to, and I wanted to return to that habit, and doing so really required just kind of engaging with what was in my sphere that I found interesting. That's how I came across Murtaugh, for example. It's Christopher Paolini's follow-up to like Aragon, the Aragon series. I would have to go back and see what the actual name of that series is, but it's like high fantasy fiction dragon magic series, and I really liked it, but I saw it at an airport. I want to be more intentional about the things that I'm putting into my brain. Let me explain. I would say that I have several categories of book that I'm trying to read this year. Most of these books fall into one or more of those categories. I want to read a lot of really great fiction in 2025, and that includes new and classics. Some of the new books that I've picked up already that I have yet to read, The First to Die at the End, and this is by Adam Silvera. Now, this is a sequel to They Both Die at the End. I read They Both Die at the End and I loved it. I read it a couple of years ago. When I saw that there was a sequel and I saw it at McKay's, prequel. This is actually a prequel, I apologize. This is like an example of a new piece of fiction that I want to read. I also picked up A Woman Is No Man, which is a novel. It's set in Brooklyn 2008, but also Palestine 1990. This is sort of a multi-generational fiction story about women of color, and I really wanted to pick this up when I saw it. I bought it. I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to. I have one more fiction book here. This is an example of the sort of classic direction that I might be moving in. This is Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I forgot Dostoevsky's first name. What I know about Dostoevsky is that his fiction is often very dark. It's very heavy, but it's also very good and worth it. And I did not expect the Goodwill in my hometown to have Dostoevsky, but they did, and I bought it. So, I want to read a lot of new fiction. I want to read a lot of classic fiction, things that I haven't made time for previously. I also want to read some poetry. I have some poets on my TBR. I'll try to list some other titles in each category that I want to read that I don't have. So I'll try to list some extra titles on the video that are on my to be read list, my TBR list for 2025, that I don't have copies of right now. I read a lot on Libby, I read a lot on Audible, I read a lot from the library, I borrow from friends. I do try to be as economical as I can. I also really love purchasing from McKay's. It's a secondhand bookshop and I really love supporting them. So I don't always have a physical copy of what I'm trying to read. I also want to read a lot of philosophy and specifically Stoicism. I picked up this copy, a copy of Modern Philosophy, an Introduction and Survey. This is by Roger Scruton. From what I can tell on Goodreads and a couple of other reviews, Roger Scruton went on to write some more conservative books or collections or writing, but this is sort of a survey of modern philosophical takes, questions, and ways of looking at things. I really want to deepen and broaden my knowledge of philosophy. I really wanted like a philosophy reader so that I could understand some of the basic philosophical points of view. This one on modern philosophy, I think modern meaning like, I forget where it begins. I'll give you an example. The nature of philosophy, skepticism, self-mind and body, truth, God, freedom, the human world, morality, life, death, and identity, imagination, perception. So there are all these philosophical topics or subjects that are in this book, and I look forward to reading about them. I also picked up Thinking About Logic, classic essays. I really want to learn more about logical arguments. I did not enjoy logic in college. I did not enjoy math classes that had logic in it, but I understand that particularly for critical thinking, standardized testing, this could be really helpful for my students. But first, I have to sort of like take it in and imbue it and get it in my head before I can help them with it. This is, I believe, 8 essays about logic. They are by authors like Lewis Carroll, W.J. Rees, J.T. Stevenson. These are essays about philosophical or logical questions by various authors that I look forward to reading. I also picked that up at McKay's. Most of these are from McKay's. The next one I have is Lessons from an American Stoic, How Emerson Can Change Your Life. And it's about Ralph Waldo Emerson, who is considered America's original Stoic. So I look forward to reading this book. This is by Mark Matosic. Sorry. I have been studying Stoicism. I've also been reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I plan to finish that in March this month. Essentially, I'm like perusing history for people, figures, moments in time when there were philosophies or points of view that might be helpful now. I think the next few years might be really difficult for our country, and so I'm always looking for something that might help me navigate that a little bit more gracefully, or might help me communicate something important to my students. So Stoicism and philosophy are really interesting to me right now. In that same vein, I picked up a copy of The Trial of Socrates. I don't know a lot about Socrates' history. I believe that he committed suicide as a result of this trial. Essentially, he was oppressed and tried to be, and the government tried to keep him from speaking what was on his mind. He was a philosopher. Let's see what I can learn from that. Perhaps about the First Amendment, perhaps about philosophy, perhaps about strong people, perhaps lessons that I should avoid, things I should avoid doing in my own life. So I look forward to that. The next category I would say is education in general. We are a private rural school. That's where I currently work, which means that a lot of us don't have teaching licenses. We're not required to by law because we're a category 4 school. Most of us have degrees in our subject area. Like I have a bachelor's in journalism, so that's why I teach English and history. But I really want to know more and I really want to serve my students better. There are a lot of things our school does really super well, and we still have a lot of learning to do, right? You can always be better. So I picked up this, Grading Smarter, Not Harder. How Teachers Can Turn Data into Action, Decision-Making and Educational Leadership. I am on the leadership team of our school. I also have some books at home like Happy Teachers Change the World. It's by Thich Nhat Hanh, and it's a meditation book for teachers. So I have all kinds of education books that are currently on the docket that I want to read this year. I'm also interested in reading more about revolution and women's rights. So I have a book about previous utopias in the United States that either failed or didn't. I live in an intentional community. I live on the farm in Summertown, Tennessee. It was founded as a commune in 1971. So that's a value that I hold, and I want to learn more about the ways that people can actually change the world around them for the better. I want to learn more about revolution, what revolution can look like. Does it always have to be violent upheaval? Are there other ways? It's something I don't know enough about the history of. So I've studied a lot of history of violent upheaval, and I used to think that was the only way to change the world and make it better, but now I actually don't feel that way. And I feel like in a lot of ways, intentional community may be a less violent solution. I don't know. I'm still figuring it out, like we all are, but studying history is a good way to start. So I'm looking for more books about revolution, about intentional community, about people changing the world around them in various ways. I also want to read more about women's rights or books that are written by women. I want to read Audre Lorde. I've never taken like a chunk of time that I just devoted to reading books like by or about women. I have read a lot of books by or about women, but I've not devoted like a section of my time dedicated just to that. And I think that I would like to do that. I've seen some people that have done a challenge where like for a whole year, they only read books by women. I don't currently think I'm able to do that because I desire to read so widely, and I don't want to limit myself currently. Not that that's a bad limitation, I just don't see myself being able or wanting to do that right now. But I do want to dedicate a portion of my time to reading more about queer history, about women's rights, about racial inequality, things that you might think of as in the political sphere. So maybe this category is like political theory or like just human rights in general. So those are some of the books I want to read this year. Here are some others that are on my TBR, my to be read list, that I don't have copies of right now. This list in front of me, these books that I have, not comprehensive. Like I said, I may find a better educational leadership book and decide to read that and then shelve this for later. So these are not even necessarily all the books that I'm gonna read in any particular order, but they are books that are new to me that I purchased recently that are on my shelf. So last night when I was like prepping to film this video, I just pulled books from my shelf that I plan on reading this year, but there are a lot more. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that you're reading as much as you can. I plan to make a series of videos about media literacy, what media literacy is and why it's so important, especially right now. So if that's something that you're interested in, please let me know. I cannot say enough how important I think media literacy is right now. And like reading books is media literacy. English class is media literacy. I think people have this like highfalutin idea about what media literacy should be. But even if you're just picking up a romantasy book and coming up with your own opinions about it, that is media literacy. So I don't care what you're reading, just pick something up and start reading. I cannot advocate for it enough. We're taking our kids, our students on a trip to the library this month because I want them all to have not just library cards, but access to the Libby app so that they can check out things like graphic novels or magazines online. I have students who prefer to read manga. That's great. I love anime. I love manga. I love graphic novels. So whatever it is that you're into reading, I'm not a purist about it. I think audiobooks count. I think podcasts count. I can't wait to listen to the telepathy tapes. That's like a podcast that's currently on my like to listen list. I think romantasy counts. I think Harlequin romance counts. Like whatever it is that you're reading, that's great. Let this be your sign to read whatever you want to read. I don't care what it is. As long as you're reading, that's all that matters. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you will all have a great day. I hope you have a book that you love. And if you do, tell me about what you're reading in a comment below. I would love to know. Thank you so much. See you soon. Bye. As a quick aside, I thought I would show you what we're reading in my middle and high school class right now. A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I'm not sure that they have gotten the humor just yet. We're still in the first chapter, but I'm hoping they'll really connect with it because I think this book is hilarious and it's sci-fi. So just goes to show you can read whatever you want. Sci-fi is media literacy. Hitchhiker's Guide is English class material and it is media literacy and it is great reading and also great fun.